Young girl saves cowboy from sinking car. In river, days later, she learns he's the millionaire who secretly owns her town. "Stop! Oh my God, stop!" Ellie screamed, her voice rising above the roar of the rain as she slammed on the brakes. The sound of twisting metal had come just seconds earlier. Now, through her fogged windshield and the sheets of water pounding from the sky, she could just make out the blur of a silver pickup truck smashing through the guardrail ahead. It careened off the side of the bridge and vanished from sight. "No, no, no!" she cried, throwing her car into park and flinging open the door. Rain lashed against her face the moment she stepped out. Wind tore at her jacket. She raced forward, heart pounding wildly, boots slipping on the soaked pavement. When she reached the edge of the bridge, she looked down and her stomach twisted. There, in the swollen Maplewood River, the pickup truck was rapidly sinking. The hood had already disappeared beneath the current, and the cab was filling with water fast. She could see the outline of someone inside, slumped behind the wheel, unmoving. Without thinking, Ellie bolted. She scrambled over the guardrail and down the embankment, her feet slipping in the mud, hands clawing at branches and stones for balance. The rain made everything slick, every step a risk. She reached the river's edge, breath heaving, teeth chattering, and stared at the truck bobbing in the current. Then she dove. The water was like a slap, icy, violent, and all-consuming. It pulled at her body with an unforgiving force, but she swam hard, arms slicing through the dark water as she fought the current. She reached the truck just as the water crept past the window line. The man inside hadn't moved. She clutched the side mirror with one hand, pounded on the glass with the other. "Hey, can you hear me? Hey!" No response. The door handle wouldn't budge. She gritted her teeth, raised her elbow and slammed it against the window, once, twice, 3 times, until the glass finally shattered. Her arm stung with the sting of small cuts, but she didn't stop. She reached in, grabbed the man's jacket, and yanked. He was heavy, dead weight. "Come on," she grunted. "Don't do this to me." With one final heave, she pulled him out of the window. His body slid free, his head lolling forward, a soaked, battered cowboy hat still clutched in his right hand. They went under. She kicked upward, lungs screaming, dragging him with her until her head broke the surface. Coughing and sputtering, she kicked toward the shore, the weight of his body dragging behind her. Every stroke was agony. Somehow she made it. They collapsed on the muddy riverbank. Ellie lay gasping, water pouring from her clothes, her limbs numb. Beside her, the man didn't stir. She turned to him quickly, pressing her fingers to his neck, a pulse. Weak, but there. "Hey," she said, slapping his cheek gently. "Hey, wake up. Don't you dare leave me after all that." He coughed, just once. His eyes opened barely a sliver, and he stared at her as if through a dream. "You okay?" she asked, blinking rain out of her eyes. He blinked, lips parting. "Thank you," he rasped. "I owe you everything." Before she could respond, he passed out again. Ellie grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. She stayed with him, keeping him warm, shielding his body as best she could with her jacket until the ambulance arrived. At the hospital, she gave her statement, told the nurse what she saw, how she found him, what she did. No one gave her his name. He didn't have ID on him, and he hadn't spoken another word. By morning, he was gone. Ellie returned to the hospital with muffins the next day, just in case, but the nurse at the front desk shook her head. He checked himself out in the middle of the night. Didn't leave a name, just vanished. She drove home in silence, confused, unsettled, and oddly haunted by his face. The way he'd held on to that old cowboy hat, even unconscious. The way he'd looked at her when he whispered those words. Over the next few days, she told the story a few times, to her co-workers at the bakery, to her best friend Hannah, even to the postman. A drifter, they all said. Lucky to be alive. Could have been worse, someone else shrugged. Let it go, Ellie, you did your good deed. She tried. She really did, until the 5th morning, when she was arranging pastries in the front window of the bakery and glanced up at the sidewalk across the street. There he was, Not riding into town like some movie scene, just standing there with a dolly full of grocery boxes, helping an elderly store owner unload them into a tiny convenience shop. The hat was the same, worn, tan, with a faded leather band. The jeans were cleaner, the boots scuffed but solid. He moved carefully, politely, avoiding attention. But it was him. Their eyes met. This time he didn't vanish. He smiled and tipped his hat. The name on the town's lips wasn't his real one. No one knew it, and Wyatt didn't offer it. Around Maplewood, he was simply the cowboy in the straw hat. He started appearing everywhere. One morning he was helping change a flat tire for an elderly woman whose car had broken down in front of the pharmacy. The next, he was seen repainting the peeling fence around the local church, not because anyone asked him to, but because it needed doing. A few afternoons later, he was spotted carrying heavy grocery bags for a blind veteran who lived 3 blocks off Main Street. He never asked for anything in return, always in the same outfit. A plain button-down shirt tucked into worn jeans, weathered boots, and that old cowboy hat perched low, shadowing his eyes. He kept to himself, but never came across as cold. He had a way of nodding that made people feel seen, a quiet presence that earned trust faster than flashy charm ever could. No one knew where he stayed or where he came from. Rumors bloomed. Of course he was a drifter, a ranch hand out of work, a guy trying to escape the city. But no one pressed. The town had seen its share of wanderers. Most passed through. This one stayed. And then he walked into Ellie's bakery. It was a slow Tuesday morning, the scent of cinnamon and yeast lingering in the warm air. Ellie was behind the counter, arranging croissants in the display case, when she heard the soft jingle of the bell above the door. She looked up, and there he was. Not across the street this time. Here. He removed his hat politely as he entered, brushing a few raindrops off the brim. "Morning," he said, voice low but friendly. "Hi," Ellie replied, startled but steady. He looked around the shop, taking in the neat rows of loaves and pastries. "Smells like memories in here," he said, smiling slightly. She arched a brow. "Good ones, I hope." "The best kind." He ordered a dozen cinnamon rolls and a box of pecan tarts, asking if they could be delivered to the Maplewood Retirement Center by noon. "Just tell them it's from a friend," he said, leaving enough cash to cover it twice over. Before leaving, he glanced at the counter and then at her name tag. "Ellie," he said thoughtfully. "Thank you for that day." She froze. "I haven't forgotten," he added, then tipped his hat and walked out. He didn't give his name. Again. But that was the moment Ellie stopped pretending she wasn't curious. He kept showing up, not just in the town, but in her mornings. He'd pass by the bakery before opening, tapping on the glass and waving if she was inside. He started ordering small things: apple turnovers, black coffee, sometimes a loaf of rye for a neighbor, and asking how her day was going. He listened. Really listened, not with the polite nods people gave while waiting for their turn to speak. Wyatt listened like someone who needed the sound of another person's voice to keep him grounded. He asked about her mother, about her favorite books, about what made her stay in Maplewood when so many others had left. And he never talked about himself. Every now and then, she tried. "So where did you learn to fix cars?" Or, "You always this handy with paintbrushes?" He'd smile, maybe shrug, and steer the conversation gently back to her. It was infuriating and charming all at once. One morning he brought her a paper cup of coffee before she opened the shop. "I figured you're always the one giving," he said. "Might be nice to be on the other end." They drank it together on the bench outside the bakery, watching the town stretch awake. "Why Maplewood?" she asked eventually. "You could be anywhere." He looked out toward the trees. "Some places just pull you back." She didn't press. Their conversations became a ritual. Short, simple, unhurried. He'd always show up first, quietly hold the door open, buy something small, and linger just long enough to leave a trace of warmth in the air. And though he remained a mystery, one thing became clear to Ellie with every encounter: This cowboy, this quiet stranger with a storm behind his eyes and silence in his bones, wasn't just passing through. He was looking for something, maybe even someone. When Wyatt asked if she wanted to go to the Maplewood Fall Festival, Ellie blinked in surprise. She was wiping down the bakery counter late one afternoon when he leaned in with his familiar half-smile and said, "I heard there's dancing and kettle corn. You up for it?" She hesitated, hands stilling on the cloth. "You mean like a date?" He shrugged. "You can call it whatever makes you say yes." Ellie laughed, despite herself. "All right, why not?" That Saturday evening, the town square glowed under strings of amber lights. Booths lined the sidewalks, offering hot cider, roasted corn, handmade jewelry, and too many types of pie to count. Children chased each other with caramel apples in hand, and someone played folk tunes on a portable speaker near the center of the crowd. Ellie arrived in a soft maroon sweater and jeans, her hair loosely braided. Wyatt was already there, holding 2 cups of cider. He wore a navy button-down over a plain white tee, his cowboy hat pulled low, and those same worn boots that somehow never looked out of place. "You clean up all right," she teased as she took the cider. "You too," he said. "You even smell like cinnamon." "I always smell like cinnamon." They wandered through the booths, stopping for grilled corn that they ate standing, laughing as the butter ran down their fingers. Wyatt tried his hand at the ring toss and missed every time. Ellie won a tiny plush bear at the dart balloons and insisted he carry it in his jacket pocket for the rest of the night. There was something easy about being with him. He never rushed the conversation, never filled silence with noise. She found herself talking more than she usually did, about the bakery, the town, her favorite books, and eventually about her father. "He died when I was 7, she said, fingers curled around her paper cup. "Heart attack. It was sudden. My mom raised me on her own after that. She's the strongest person I know, but her own heart's not great these days." Wyatt's expression softened, his hands tucked in his pockets. "That's a heavy start for a kid." It was, but Maplewood has a way of catching you when you fall. He nodded, glancing toward the square. "It does." Ellie tilted her head. "You say that like someone who's fallen here before." He didn't answer right away. They walked in silence for a few moments, passing the line for cider donuts and caramel apples. Then the music shifted, an upbeat old country tune that had a few couples moving to the center of the square to dance under the lights. "Do you dance?" he asked suddenly. "I've been known to try." He held out a hand. "Let's test that." She took it, surprised by how naturally her fingers fit in his. They stepped into the twirling group, and though he didn't say much, he moved confidently, guiding her gently, never once missing a beat. Around them, the world blurred into lights and laughter. Ellie's cheeks flushed from more than just the cool air. She hadn't danced like this in years, not since high school, not since her world got serious. "You're good at this," she said. "Used to be," he replied. "Used to be when?" Wyatt smiled but didn't answer. Later, they sat on a bench near the edge of the square, sipping fresh cider and watching the crowd thin. "You really do know everyone here," he said. "Like you're part of the foundation." "I've lived here my whole life," she said. "I guess the town sort of grows around you." He nodded slowly, thoughtful. Ellie looked over at him, then asked the question that had been quietly circling her mind for days. "Have you lived here before?" Wyatt turned to her, a flicker of something passing across his face. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "You seem to know this place too well to be new," she continued. "You knew about Mrs. Beasley's broken porch before anyone told you. You took that shortcut behind the library the other day like you'd walked it 100 times. Have you?" There was a pause. Then Wyatt offered a faint, almost sad smile. "I've passed through." "That's not what I asked." He looked away, fingers tightening slightly around his cup. "Some things are easier left in the past." Ellie's brows furrowed. "Why does that sound like you're hiding something?" Wyatt turned back to her, that soft deflection still in his eyes. Because maybe I am. She studied him for a moment, trying to read between the lines. Then, quietly, she said, "You don't have to tell me everything. Just don't pretend there's nothing to tell." Wyatt didn't reply. The music faded behind them. The lights shimmered above, but for the first time that night, the warmth between them cooled, just slightly, like a breeze passing through an open door not yet shut. The bakery was quieter than usual that morning. Rain tapped softly against the window panes, and Ellie stood behind the counter, restocking the pastry trays with practiced hands. Wyatt had come in early, like he often did, picking up 2 coffees and a box of croissants for the folks at the shelter, as he said. But today, something was different. He had stepped outside to take a phone call, and though Ellie hadn't meant to overhear, his voice carried through the open door. "I'll make the final decision by next week. Maplewood's future is on the line. Tell Blackstone Holdings to hold off until they hear from me." Her hands froze over the tray. Blackstone Holdings. The name rang in her ears like a warning bell. She ducked out of sight quickly, heart pounding, mind racing. Wyatt's voice lowered, and she couldn't catch anything else, but the damage was done. That name, she knew it. Everyone in Maplewood knew it. Blackstone Holdings was the real estate conglomerate that had bought up half the county in the past decade, quietly purchasing land and businesses under various shell companies, including the deed to the land her mother's house sat on. She waited until Wyatt left, flashing her that easy, familiar smile and promising to see her tomorrow. She nodded, barely managing a smile in return. As soon as he was out of sight, she pulled out her phone and searched. Her fingers trembled. Wyatt Eli Blackstone, CEO, in waiting, son of Charles Blackstone, the late founder, current acting executive, known for his silence in the press and avoidance of public appearances, a recluse, a mystery, a lie. He wasn't just some cowboy who drifted into town, he owned it. That evening, Ellie sat on the bench outside the bakery, arms crossed, watching the dusk settle over Maplewood. The lights from the storefronts flickered on one by one. The rain had stopped, but the chill in the air remained. Wyatt arrived right on time, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You always bring 2, she said without looking at him. He chuckled, handing her one. "Habit, I guess. Or hope." She took the cup but didn't drink. "You said something earlier," she said carefully. "On the phone." He tensed, almost imperceptibly. "Did I?" "Something about deciding the fate of Maplewood. About Blackstone Holdings." Silence. She turned to face him fully. "Why didn't you tell me who you are?" His expression flickered, surprise, then resignation. "I was going to." "When? After you bought up the rest of the town?" He exhaled slowly, setting his coffee down on the bench beside him. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because it feels exactly like what I think." Her voice sharpened. "You came here pretending to be one of us, fixing fences, helping strangers, ordering pastries like it was all real. But it wasn't. You were just doing research, weren't you? Playing humble observer. And what was I, Wyatt? Part of your experiment? A local flavor to spice up your market analysis?" He didn't flinch, but he didn't deny it either. "I came here to remember what it meant to belong somewhere," he said quietly. "I didn't know if I ever had, not really. I didn't plan for any of this." Ellie stood, anger tightening her shoulders. "You knew I trusted you. You let me believe you were just here. Like me, like any of us." "I was here," he said. "Just not the way you thought." "Exactly," she snapped. "You were a lie." Wyatt looked up at her, pain in his eyes, voice steady. "I used to believe being in charge meant being in control. Of everything. Buildings, people, futures. Then I came here, and I met you." Ellie hesitated. "You didn't change because of who I am," he continued. "You were kind to a stranger. You pulled me out of a river. You listened. You challenged me. You saw a man, not a name. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to be the guy with all the answers. I just wanted to be enough." The words settled between them like dust after an explosion. Ellie looked away, her throat tight. "You should have told me." "I know." She turned back to him, eyes burning. "So what happens now? You go back to your boardroom and decide if we live or die here?" Wyatt's voice was soft. "No. I came here thinking I would make a decision. But now, I think maybe Maplewood is the one deciding for me." She didn't reply. He stood, his coffee forgotten. "I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry I did." Then he walked away, not looking back. Ellie watched him go, every step like a question she didn't know how to answer. Wyatt was gone. No goodbye, no note, just silence. He disappeared the same way he had arrived, quietly, without fuss or drama, as if he had never really been there at all. But he had. Ellie could feel the space he left behind, like a missing tooth in the rhythm of her days. She still opened the bakery each morning, still stocked the same pastries and poured the same coffee, but nothing felt the same. The bench outside stayed empty. Every time the bell over the door rang, her heart leapt before she even realized she was hoping. The town murmured, of course. His name was still unknown to most, but the rumors of a large land buyout grew louder by the day. The paper ran a short column about a prospective development deal and resort zoning discussion. Then the letter came. It arrived folded in an unmarked envelope, slipped under the bakery's door. Ellie opened it after closing, hands dusted in flour, still wearing her apron. The logo at the top was unfamiliar, something sleek and corporate, but the message was clear. A formal proposal was being submitted to the town council for a full redevelopment of the riverfront district. The goal: a modern resort, retail strip, and luxury condos. Several properties would be subject to compulsory buyout under eminent domain, including hers. Her hands trembled. The next day, flyers began appearing on telephone poles and notice boards. Public hearing, Maplewood Town Hall, community feedback on development proposal, this Thursday. She didn't sleep much that week, or bake much either. Hannah offered to cover the counter while Ellie took some time, though neither of them said out loud what for. On Thursday evening, Ellie stood at the back of the crowded town hall, shoulders tense, palms damp. The room buzzed with nervous energy, business owners, farmers, retirees clutching letters just like hers. The front table was lined with city officials, their expressions tight. When the presentation began, Ellie already knew what it would say. A tall man in a gray suit spoke confidently about opportunity, investment, progress. He promised jobs, tourism, revitalization. He clicked through slides showing shiny buildings, new infrastructure, smiling families shopping under perfect blue skies, but none of them looked like Maplewood. Then came the moment for public comment. No one moved. Ellie's heart pounded. Her throat felt dry. She stood anyway. The room turned to look. She took a shaky breath. "My name is Ellie Dawson. My family has lived in Maplewood for 3 generations. We're not opposed to growth. But what you're offering isn't growth. It's erasure." A low murmur spread across the room. She pressed on. "You want to build something shiny and new, but it will come at the cost of everything this town actually is. The land you're targeting isn't just real estate. It's homes. It's history. It's people who show up when a stranger's car breaks down or when someone's porch starts rotting." Her voice grew steadier. "I know who's behind this," she said, "and I know he wasn't always like this. I believed he saw what makes this place matter. I hope," she paused, "I hope he still does." Silence fell. Then someone clapped. Another joined. Soon, half the room was on their feet. Ellie didn't cry until she sat back down. She wasn't sure if it would matter, if any of them could change what was coming, but for the first time since Wyatt disappeared, she felt like she was standing on solid ground again, and if he was still out there, watching, wondering. She hoped he heard her. The town hall was full again. A week had passed since the last meeting, but the tension in the air was thicker than before. This time, people came early. They brought signs. They brought stories. They brought questions that no sleek slideshow could answer. Ellie sat in the third row, hands folded in her lap. Her heart beat loud in her ears, but her face was calm. She didn't know what she expected to happen that night. Maybe more of the same. Developers in suits, hollow promises, and tired eyes. What she didn't expect was for the back doors of the hall to swing open halfway through the meeting, and for Wyatt Blackstone to walk in, not in a hat or dusty boot, no pretense, no hiding. He wore a plain black button-down shirt, dark jeans, and a look that said he knew exactly what this moment meant. The room went silent. People whispered. Some recognized him from town. Others were just confused. But Ellie knew. The moment their eyes met, she knew he hadn't just come back. He had come to choose. He walked straight to the front of the room and asked politely to speak. The mayor, clearly caught off guard, stepped aside. Wyatt turned to face the crowd. No microphone, just his voice. "My name is Wyatt Blackstone," he began. "Yes, that Blackstone." A ripple ran through the crowd. "For the past few months, I've lived among you. Not as an owner, not as a CEO, just as a man trying to remember what mattered." His eyes found Ellie's again. "When I came here, I thought I was supposed to make a decision about land, about numbers, about strategy. But what I found was something else entirely." He took a breath. "I found a town that still helps each other fix porches without asking why. A place where people bring baked goods to sick neighbors, where a girl jumps into a river to save a stranger without thinking twice." Ellie felt her throat tighten. "I came here to see if Maplewood was worth saving, but Maplewood didn't need saving. I did." The room was still. No one moved. "So here's my decision," Wyatt said, his voice steady. "There will be no resort. No forced buyouts. No luxury condos." A gasp swept the room. "I'm dissolving the development deal and transferring land use rights to a new community trust, operated locally. The people of Maplewood will decide what gets built and what doesn't." The silence broke, first with a murmur, then with applause, then with full-on cheering. Wyatt held up a hand. "I don't need to own this town to call it home. I just need to know it belongs to the people who've loved it all along." And then he stepped down. Later, as the crowd slowly filtered out, Ellie stood by the door, unsure what to say when he approached. He didn't speak at first, just reached into his coat and pulled out a small manila envelope. "I believe you once said you dreamed of a bookshop," he said. Ellie opened it. Inside was a signed deed, 1 lot, riverfront property, formerly zoned for demolition. Attached, a simple business permit application, pre-approved. "It's yours," he said. "Do whatever you want with it. You've earned more than just a say." She looked up at him, eyes full, voice quiet. "You really meant it?" He nodded. Every word. A long silence passed between them, but it wasn't heavy. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "Neither am I," he replied. "But maybe we don't have to be. Maybe we just begin." And under the dim glow of town hall lights, with the sounds of hope still echoing off the walls, they stood side by side, two people choosing something harder than ownership, deeper than control. They chose each other. The space sat empty for years, once a hardware store, then a laundromat, and most recently a boarded-up shell on Maplewood's riverfront strip. But now, the dust had cleared. The windows were replaced, the walls painted in soft earth tones, and sunlight streamed through the glass like a promise. Ellie stood in the center of it all, a roller in one hand, a streak of blue paint on her cheek. Wyatt stood on a ladder nearby, adjusting a light fixture above the front counter. "Try it now," he called. She flicked the switch. The bulbs flickered, then glowed. Warm, steady light. She looked up and smiled. Perfect. For weeks they had worked side by side, scraping, painting, lifting, laughing. They argued over tile colors, floor plans, even the smell of the coffee roast. But the disagreements were easy, full of the kind of friction that builds instead of breaks. They weren't rushing, they weren't pretending everything was already fixed, but they were moving forward, together. Outside, a handmade sign hung in the window, "Coming soon, Rising River Books and Cafe." The idea had been Ellie's, but the momentum had been theirs. They didn't stop at the bookstore. That summer, Wyatt helped her organize Maplewood's first ever Little Readers Camp, held in the town square. Children gathered under colorful tents to listen to stories, do crafts, and sip lemonade. Ellie read aloud each morning. Wyatt handled setup and ran the cornhole tournament in the afternoons. He wore a lopsided Book Buddies apron the entire week, much to the amusement of every kid under 10. It wasn't just the kids who came. Parents stayed. Grandparents volunteered. The town showed up, day after day, drawn to something that felt more like family than an event. Behind the scenes, Wyatt worked quietly with the Community Trust Board, never seeking credit. It was his influence that secured the grant for medical upgrades at Maplewood General. It was his anonymous donation that covered Mrs. Dawson's new heart monitor and medication for the year. Ellie found out from the nurse. "You know," she said one evening as they closed up camp, folding chairs and rolling banners, "you don't have to keep doing all this behind the curtain." Wyatt glanced up from the supply bin. "I'm not doing it to be seen." "I know," she said. "But maybe it's okay if people see the good you're doing. Maybe they deserve to," he shrugged. "Maybe I'm still learning what it means to show up." She stepped closer. "I used to think being loved meant being used, like people only stuck around when they needed something." His eyes met hers, quiet and steady. "And I used to think that being known meant being rejected. Like if I showed who I really was, no one would stay." She reached for his hand. "Let's stop running," she said. "No more fear, no more hiding. Just, let's walk toward each other." Wyatt exhaled slowly, then smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "Deal," he whispered. That night, they sat on the steps of the future bookstore, watching the river drift quietly under the moonlight. The town behind them was peaceful. The stars above were clear. For the first time in a long time, neither of them needed to speak. Because everything they needed to say, they were already living. The bells over the door jingled for the 100th time that morning. Rising River Books and Cafe was officially open, and Maplewood had shown up in full. Sunlight poured through the tall front windows, casting golden light across shelves lined with paperbacks and hardcovers, memoirs and children's tales. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the soft hum of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. A group of toddlers sat cross-legged in the reading nook, listening to Miss Ellie, now affectionately known as Story Lady, read aloud from a picture book about a talking river. Near the back, two retired teachers debated over their favorite American poets while sipping herbal tea. In the community corner, neighbors swapped gently used novels and posted handwritten notes on the Books I Love board. The space pulsed with life. Not just as a business, but as a home. A place built not from profit, but from purpose. And at the center of it all stood Ellie, watching it unfold with misted eyes and a heart fuller than she'd ever known possible. Wyatt moved through the crowd quietly, refilling mugs, picking up napkins, helping a young boy reach the top. He hadn't worn the cowboy hat today, but the same familiar ease lingered in his movements. No longer a stranger, no longer a secret, just a man fully rooted in where he'd chosen to be. By noon, the official ribbon-cutting ceremony began. Ellie stood by the door with a pair of silver scissors, Wyatt beside her, his hand lightly resting on the small of her back. Her mother sat in the front row, cheeks flushed with pride, eyes shining. Hannah waved from behind the coffee bar, already out of muffins but grinning ear to ear. "Thank you," Ellie said, voice warm as she addressed the crowd. "A year ago, this place was just a dream. Or maybe it was a memory waiting to be built. And none of it would have happened without all of you." She turned to Wyatt. "Especially you." The ribbon fluttered to the floor with a cheer. Flashbulbs popped. The crowd surged forward, pouring into the store like light through an open window. Later that afternoon, as things quieted and sunlight softened into gold, Wyatt led Ellie to the back of the store, away from the chatter. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, square box. "I've been holding on to this," he said, "for the right day." Ellie's breath caught. "Today's the right day?" He nodded and opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, its band hammered smooth, and set in the center, delicate, unpolished, unmistakable, a soft gray stone, imperfect and beautiful. She recognized it instantly. "The river," she whispered. He smiled. "The day you pulled me from the water, you dropped your flashlight. When I went back later to look for it, I found this caught in the rocks. I kept it. I didn't know why at the time." He looked up at her, eyes steady. "But now I do." Ellie blinked back tears. "You didn't just save my life that day," he said. "You saved what was left of me. You pulled me out of more than just a river. You pulled me out of a life where I didn't belong, into one I never thought I deserved." He held the ring out. "I know this place is yours. I just hope there's still room in it for me." Ellie's hands trembled as she took the ring, her voice barely above a breath. "There always was." He slipped it onto her finger. It wasn't perfect. Neither were they. But it was exactly what they both needed. Imperfect, enduring, and real. Outside, children laughed in the reading nook. Coffee steamed. Sunlight danced across the bookshelves like confetti. And just beyond the windows, the Maplewood River flowed steadily, quietly, the same way it always had. Ellie looked up at him and smiled. "You once said you didn't need to own a place to call it home," she whispered. "But you do now." Wyatt leaned in, forehead resting gently against hers. "You saved me from the flood," he murmured, "and from a life that was sinking without even knowing it. Then, soft and sure, let me be the one who stays." And with her hand in his, Ellie Dawson opened the door, not just to their bookstore, but to the life they had built, word by word, day by day, from the wreckage of silence and the courage to begin again. Thank you for joining us on this journey of love, redemption, and finding home in the most unexpected places. If Wyatt and Ellie's story moved your heart, reminded you of the quiet power of second chances, or made you believe just a little more in the goodness of people, then this is the kind of story we'll keep sharing with you. Don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Here, every story is meant to heal, to inspire, and to remind you that sometimes the smallest acts can change everything. Until next time, keep your heart open, because love often finds us where we least expect it.